So the first question, Sheikh, is, I believe, from a sister. And she asks, she says, I understand the Islamic teachings on the rights of parents and the ties of kingship. But when your siblings and parents interfere with your parenting of your almost teenage children, is it okay to contact with them or at least limit it to a few hours a week? I am a single parent and the rest of the family are opposed to how I am instilling prayer and Islamic classes into the children from a young age, and the children rebel against me when they are around their grandparents. Can you hear it now? Alright, sorry.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمد شاكرين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So this first question that you asked me, with regard to this question is based upon the premise about birrul walidain, ta'atul walidain, which is obedience to parents, and the opposite of which is uququl walidain, which is disobeying the parents. Based on that premise, the questioner is asking, do the parents who are the grandparents of the children, do they have the right to interfere in the education of the child? Now, I will give everyone a principle. That principle will help us decipher so many questions that will be based upon similar type of situations. That principle is simple. To be an obedient child to your own parents, obedience entails obeying them firstly in what is fard and avoiding what is haram. So parents have a right to tell you, do this prayer, fast in the month of Ramadan, avoid alcohol. That is a right of the parent of the child. The second is that a child is not disobedient if he refuses to do that which will harm him, or if he refuses to do that which goes against the Sharia. That's a principle. So parents cannot tell you to do something that will harm you. That is a principle that I will continuously mention, and that applies here. So in this case scenario that you asked me about, the parents have no right to tell the
grandparents.
the grandparents have no right to tell the mother, in this case, not to instruct the children, the grandchildren in Islam. She can refuse to obey that particular command. So commonly, culturally, people frighten their children by saying they must obey their parents. Yes, they must obey their parents in that which is fard, in avoiding what is haram, and doing that which does not harm them. So if it's harmful to the child does not obey the parents, to the point that even if the parents, they want the child to marry a particular person, the child does not need to obey. That's the Sharia. It's good if he obeys. It's good if she obeys. There will be barakah in that marriage. But if the child refuses, they will not fall under aqlil walidain. This word aqlil walidain means disobedient to the parents. Uququl walidain. This word uququl walidain refers to the opposite to bar bil walidain. Bar bil walidain is obedient to the parents, good to the parents. Aqlil walidain is the opposite, the disobedient child. In this case scenario, the child will not fall into disobedience.
So can she, this single parent, contact between the grandparents and the grandchildren, or at least limit it to a few hours a week?
So she limits the meeting between the grandparents based upon the grandparents turning the children away from the deen of Allah, if that is actually the case. If the grandparents are saying the grandchildren do not need to learn Islam or Islamic instruction or Islamic teachings, she limits their involvement with the grandchildren. She has the right to do that based upon the question. Remember, my response is based upon the question.
The second question.
Should the Sharia councils also advise the mothers that the child goes to the father at the age of 7 years old? They issue a khula and they say, there you go. Should they also give full Islamic advice? What are your thoughts?
So with regard to this question, there's a few segments to this. Firstly, khula, this issue of khula. What is khula? Khula is when the woman demands a divorce from the man. This is known as khula. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a hadith dispraised the woman who demands a khula without a valid reason. If there's no real valid reason, Shari'i, Islamic reason. The woman, when she demands this khula, the man then is paid by the woman. So generally speaking, the dowry or whatever payment the man demands, and based upon that, she is separated from the husband by two divorces. In the Hanafi school, two divorces occur. In the Shafi'i school, fasq, it's the nikah is finished. So these councils or these Sharia boards that are set up in the UK, they do khul'a in the wrong way. What do? The woman will demand a khul'a. She pays a fee to this board. The board will take money from her. They will write a letter to the man. The man may not even respond. Once they have issued 3 letters, they claim that the nikah has been, meaning the fasq. The nikah has, fasq means what? It means that the nikah has been abrogated, finished. So they claim that they have the authority to finish people's nikah. So firstly, these Sharia boards in the UK do not have the right to do that. The man must be cooperating with the woman and agree to the fasq nikah. Otherwise, the fasq is not, it does not carry any legal grounds. The second segment was with regard to the adoption of the child after the age of 7. What they say is when the child is able to comb his own hair, wear his own clothes, dress himself up, bathe himself, meaning he's responsible to a degree, the father has more rights over the future of that child in terms of education, upbringing, and all these things. Now, in this country, many divorced women, they use the children as leverage over the man. And this should not be done. It goes against the principles of Islam. It goes against fitrah. The child needs access to his father. So many families, the family situations, they utilize the children for leverage against each family member. So that would be deemed haram in the Sharia. The woman should allow the father to have access to his children and to determine the future of the child in terms of education and other aspects of his life.
This one is why is there so much discrimination against the disabled in our community? What is the ruling on marriage for the disabled?
Discrimination against disabled people is not only in our community, it's found in other communities as well. But the marriage of a disabled person is permitted. But in terms of marriage, there's those things that need to be determined before marriage in terms of upkeep, maintenance, as well as physical well-being. So if a disabled person did get married and becomes a burden, these things need to be addressed correctly. Is that disabled person a burden upon the person he marries? So sometimes what they do is they marry a person who has a disability to a woman who is vulnerable, meaning from a poor background. So they marry a man who has disabilities, and it becomes a burden for the woman who's from a vulnerable background. This would be something discouraged. Sometimes you may have marriages of 2 disabled people, which would be more agreeable. For instance, in our neighborhood, there are 2 blind people who are married, and their marriage works. Or sometimes autistic people, 2 autistic people get married. But these are for the family, these type of marriages are for the family to determine whether this marriage is conceivable, whether this marriage is good for the people who are both, in this case, both parties, whether the marriage would be good for both partners. So there is not discrimination. There must be safeguarding for both partners in terms of determining who should be married.
Bachara said,
Me and my wife both work. I pay for everything, yet my wife claims my money is all hers.
This is incorrect. So, if they are both working, they must share the costs. She cannot take all his money. She is sinful with Allah for taking all his money, and they both need to share the costs. Now, some people, when I mentioned in one of my previous lectures, I said a chicken costs £5. They were writing, where does a chicken cost £5? I think most of these people never go to the butchers to purchase a chicken. If you go to Stratford Road here in Birmingham, I buy Taj Halal chickens, Taj butchers who slaughter by hand. I purchase them myself for £5. And I said it costs £10 to make what an entire meal for the entire family. So these type of women are the women who never go to a butcher's to purchase that type of chicken. So this man, his situation seems miserable. He should say to her very clearly that you are working and therefore you share the costs. I do not need to pay for any of your costs. If you choose not to work, then I will pay for all your costs. The right of the woman is only in terms of maintenance entails that she stays at home, because it's haram for the woman to leave the home without the permission of the husband. Now that she has taken the permission to work, she must bear the costs also along with the man.
How do I keep good relations? How do I keep good relations with my wife and parents when she doesn't want to live with them?
So your relationship with your parents does not involve your relationship with your wife. The two should not be intermixing. In terms of why should a good relationship with your wife undermine your relationship with your parents? Or why should your relationship with your parents undermine your relationship with your wife? That's an unhealthy marriage and an unhealthy relationship with your parents. So for instance, when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh ordered his son to divorce his wife, what is the fiqh ruling of that? The fiqh ruling is that today's parents are not Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. So the fiqh ruling is the child is not obliged to divorce his wife on the behest of the parents. Meaning the fiqh ruling is different. So he keeps them apart in terms of what? That there is no clash between the two. But these type of things must be determined before marriage, not after marriage. Some women, they are conniving. They will plan to enter a marriage, and after they have their foot in the door, they will make all these demands. These things should be made clear from before the contract is carried out, before the nikah contract is carried out. Whether the woman will live with the parents or not live with the parents. As well as there is also, if she decides not to live with the parents, there is still the ihsan of what? The ihsan of having a working relationship with the in-laws. Because that's one of the huquq, 10 huquq. One of them is what? Is that she is good towards the family of the husband. And vice versa, the man should be good to her family. But some women, what they want is the husband to be good to their family, to her family, without her reciprocating goodness to the family of the man.
Yeah, so, okay.
So he says, I think it's the same guy, Bachara, that if my wife does not want me to mix with if my wife does not want me to mix with my family, but expects me to socialize with hers, what do I do?
You refuse. If the woman is demanding, this is a demon of a woman. If she is demanding that you mix with her family and do not mix with your own family, that's a demon of a woman. So he should refuse and disobey her. You never obey your wife. There's no obligation on obeying a wife. So this is a demon of a woman. He should not obey her in this regard, and she should learn something with regard to etiquette and adab in terms of what? Of the fact that the husband is not obliged to mix and socialize with her family and refuse to mix and socialize with his own parents.
I think this Bachara is getting divorced, it says you mentioned on a previous clip trending on TikTok around stopping the wife from seeing her parents. Could you tell us a bit more about this with references to classical works?
After I made this comment, some people who are madrasa graduates, they objected to this. When they objected, I sent a passage from Al-Lubab. What I actually had said was the husband has the right to refuse the parents of the wife to enter his home. So they can meet her at the doorstep. This is what it mentions. When they want to meet their daughter, the husband has a right to stop them from entering his home. In that case, the parents can meet her at the doorstep. Why I mention such an extreme example is to inform the modern feminists that there are rights of the husband which are never enforced. No one does this. Very rarely does anyone carry this out. So if women want to remain persistent on certain rights, in many cases rights that they do not have, like for instance, I mentioned the woman who works, she doesn't have the right to the wealth of the man. So in this case, if men wanted to really be mean, they could enforce certain things that are found in the books of fiqh. What was the point of the clip? To say both sides need ihsan. Both sides need what? State of perfection. That marriage is a give and take. The man forfeits certain things, the woman forfeits certain things.
Islamically, do we have to buy our wife a house or just rent a property?
Islamically, you do not need to purchase a property. You need to provide accommodation. Whatever the means of providing accommodation the man can carry out, he provides accommodation. That is what he is obliged to do. But some people, they place pressure on the man to purchase a property. And in this day and age, we know that there is a housing shortage. There is a housing crisis in the UK. There are not enough homes available for people to purchase for a cheap price. The houses are overpriced here in the UK. So the man is then, and the women are demanding as well. They want the man to purchase so many things. And then most men are not earning more than £30,000 a year or £33,000 a year. But they expect the man to earn over 50,000, 80,000 to provide for their lifestyle. If you check even doctors who work in the NHS, you'll find that many new doctors, they only earn £38,000 a year. With that wage, you are not able to purchase a house. A person cannot purchase a house.
Nikah, Misyar, or are Misyar marriages allowed? Could you explain Misyar to the brothers as well?
So, Misyar is a nikah that certain people carry out where the woman forfeits her rights. She forfeits the rights. So when she forfeits her rights, the marriage is, they have a nikah contract. She doesn't ostensibly demand anything from the man. Why I say ostensibly? Because anyone who has lived real life will know that that is not how life works. What will happen is when the man and woman, when they begin to have relationships, the woman will develop feelings for the man, and eventually her emotions will overcome her and she will demand things. So initially, misyar may sound easy. You carry out a marriage contract and there is no, she doesn't demand anything, she doesn't demand any rights. But what will happen after a while? She will develop feelings and she will demand. So the marriage will always fail. It will always be miserable. It will always be scandalous.
Can she change
But
the contract?
no, afterwards she cannot change the contract. But what is the status of misyar? I'll tell you what misyar is. Misyar is deceitful. How is it deceitful? It's deceitful in the sense that a man goes and marries a woman for 2 hours. He gives her £1,000 as mahr and he divorces her after 2 hours intentionally. Technically, the nikah was done. But we know that this is just another name for prostitution. That the man married her for 2 hours, intending to divorce after 2 hours. So misyar is finding a loophole to fulfill the carnal desires without social responsibility. That is what misyar is. So people should not do misyar, they should avoid misyar. It has many downfalls, pitfalls, and one of them is that it goes against ihsan, it goes against the very essence of our deen. For instance, slaughtering a goat by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim with a sharp implement is ihsan. If I get a blunt instrument and slaughter the goat, blunt instrument, and slaughter the goat will still be halal, but I have literally tortured the goat to death. This is how misyar is. That you remove the sharpness of a knife and you use and utilize a blunt blade, you literally torture the goat. So this is how misyar is. It has harmful effects on the children, it has harmful effects on the woman, and it harms the man also.
Says, why
Is
is
muta forbidden and misyar allowed then?
So Muta was mansukh, it was abrogated. Misyar is something modern. Misyar is people finding a loophole in the Sharia and making misyar common. Through this loophole, people have, what have they done? They have violated the sanctity of nikah. So even though, for instance, fasting on Eid day, are you allowed to fast on Eid day? If someone fasts on Eid day, the fast is done. You cannot say the fast is not done. But is fasting on Eid day recommended? The answer is no. There is a prohibition on fasting on Eid day. Misyar is like what I mentioned to you, a man marrying a woman with the intention of 2 hours, giving her a dowry, and then divorcing her after 2 hours. It's finding a loophole for something that is not good. And there are many loopholes like this in the Sharia.
This brother said, if I have a misyar marriage to prevent myself and my partner from committing zina, is this okay? She is of an elderly age and does not want me to be a traditional husband.
So again, they will not fall under zina, but they fall under nikah. So they will be under nikah. But then afterwards, if he divorces her, afterwards, if he gets rid of her, then it goes against the ihsan of our deen. It goes against the state of perfection, meaning it doesn't bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The purpose of nikah is to bring you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you get married to safeguard yourself and bring yourself closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are other intentions of nikah, like having children, to raise them up who do dhikrullah. This is why Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh said that he only gets married in order that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings from his loins someone who will do dhikrullah. With this type of marriage, all these things are void, meaning all these things are not found.
I want to marry a divorced woman. She has children from a previous marriage, but due to cultural norms, it is difficult for me to get my parents' permission. We both want to marry each other for companionship, but it's not the right time for her children to be introduced to me. Am I able to marry her without her parents' permission?
Again, these type of nikah contracts, the contract will happen, but there is no ihsan. I would disadvise the person to marry her without her parents' permission. He should take the parents' permission. This is why many years ago, there was a doctor who gave a fatwa that young people should marry without parents' permission. Now in the Hanafi school, when they do this, the nikah gets done. So he based his statement on the fact that the nikah gets done. So many ulama, they opposed him. They said this leads to corruption. Young women and young men carrying out nikah without permission of parents, it will lead to corruption because they will get married, the marriage will not work, they will end up in divorce. It's a type of corruption. Similarly here, marrying this divorcee woman without her parents' permission is not recommended, then this person, he doesn't make it clear. Is he already married himself? Meaning, if he is already married, then he should not marry her because he will destroy his first marriage. He doesn't make that clear. If he is a single man, then the recommendation is that he marries a single woman who has no children, because marriages are three types. You either marry a woman who has never been married, or you marry a woman who has been married but she has children, and the third scenario, a woman who has been married and has no children. For the single man, it would be recommended he marry a woman who has never been married prior, because the woman he will marry, that is a divorcee or a widow, she will always judge him in accordance with the judgment of her first husband. So it's recommended for divorcees to marry divorcees and widowers to marry widows. And in this case, a bachelor to marry a woman who is single and has never been married before. So the questioner doesn't make certain things very clear. Some of these men are tricky in how they attempt to carry out second nikahs and to carry out undercover nikahs. And they only do this to fulfill their carnal desires without any social responsibility.
Advice and guidance for young people looking for spouses for both brothers and sisters.
So remember, firstly, anyone who gets married for the sake of Allah, in a hadith it's very clearly mentioned there are certain people for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed rizq. One of them is a mujahid in the way of Allah. One of them is a young person who gets married for the sake of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide his rizq. So they shouldn't worry about rizq. So many parents, they delay the nikah of their children, saying they need to work, they need to do this. They have no reliance on Allah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for them. Secondly, if you are looking for the perfect spouse, you will never find her. One talibul ilm wrote a letter to his sheikh with all, it was a poem. He wrote a poem with all the traits of the woman he wants, all the different traits. The sheikh wrote back to him saying that if I find such a wife for you or such a suitor for you, I will divorce my current wife and marry her myself. Meaning what? That you will never find the perfect woman and you will never find the perfect man. So what do you find? You need to find someone who has deen. And what is having deen? Deen is how you see the person's interactions before marriage. Meaning someone with deen within them will safeguard your deen. Someone who prays, someone who is away from corruption of zina, fornication. This corruption you find where people talk to women online. You have imams, shuyukh, all these type of religious people talking to young women online, chatting to them. That's all haram. Meaning ostensibly you'll think that imam is pious or that student of knowledge is pious, but behind the scenes they are chatting to young girls, young women, flirting. All these things are haram. So if you find a wife on a chat line or these internet and WhatsApp, then do not expect anything good from her later. This is how so many young people, what they do. They chat and flirt online, on Facebook, on Instagram, all these type of social media platforms, and even off the platforms, and then they expect to find a woman who is pious and pure. Later on, they may find out things regarding her, and likewise regarding him, that he is doing the same again after he gets married. He still does the same thing.
What advice would you give brothers who want to get married for the second or third time?
I would advise them not to get married the second and third time because they will destroy their first marriage and they will always be involved in scandals. Secondly, the Quran, when it gives the permission to get married second and third times, it tells you to do justice, but it informs us you will not be able to do justice amongst the women. The justice between the women, a man who is unable to do justice on Yawm al-Qiyamah is resurrected half paralyzed. He has a paralysis in one side of the body because he was unable to be just. And remember, if a man fulfills his requirements with the first wife, he has no need for a second wife. Most of the time, these men, they have no rujuliya, which is manliness, with the first wife, and then they think they need a second wife. but they are not satisfying the first wife. They are not completely satisfying the first wife, and then they run to a second wife. Then what happens at the end? They become like an old goat that's caught between two female goats, and then the two female goats beat up the old goat. And that's what eventually happens.
What type of men meet the standard of having multiple wives in today's day and age if men struggle to fulfill the rights of the first but still want more?
So these are men who, in this day and age, most of these men who do have second nikah, they may not be fulfilling the rights of their first wife. And there is much more detail to that in terms of not only financially, they need to fulfill her rights in other ways. So because they cannot fulfill the rights of the first one, if they were fulfilling her needs in the biological sense, then she would not be doing their head in to the point that they need to run away to a second wife. This is what happens. They may not be fulfilling her, and then remember, women defend themselves with the tongue. When women are unfulfilled, they defend themselves with the tongue because they are the weaker sex. And they say the strongest tongue is the tongue of a tiger. If it licks off paint off the wall, the paint sticks to its tongue, and the only tongue that's stronger is the tongue of a woman. So this tongue is what the woman will utilize. But if the woman is being fulfilled, she will not utilize her tongue in order to make the man semi-mad, meaning lose his mind. So this is why these men then they go running after second wives.
Does the wife always
Have to listen to the husband.
The only time the wife doesn't need to listen to the husband is when it's disobedience to Allah and it harms her. If it's disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or it harms her, she does not need to listen to the husband. Otherwise, if it's something mubah, then she obeys the husband.
Should couples move out straight away or live with their in-laws?
So this is depending on the family situation. Meaning, if the wife is fine to live with her in-laws, then they should live with their in-laws. But so many times what these women do is they marry, and then after living with the in-laws for a year or 2 years, then they make an issue. And sometimes it splits the household to the point that it becomes a fight between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law over the man in the middle. So the man who gets married, he doesn't know how to be a man. So he doesn't know how to do siyasa between the mother and the wife. So he may in some cases relay information from his wife to his mother. And sometimes what his mother says regarding his wife to the wife. And this leads to more trouble. When in reality the husband and wife should be clothing for one another, which means covering. So you cover the faults of the husband. The wife should cover the faults of the husband. Any marriage that ever fails is always because the wife is uncovering the faults of her husband, or the husband is uncovering the faults of the wife in front of others. So the man should be covering the faults of his wife, the wife should cover the faults of her husband, and the husband should not carry tales between the wife and his mother. He should keep a barrier between the two. But then what happens is some of these women, they marry into a household, and then after a year or two they make stories, and then what happens is the son moves out and they purchase their own house. These things should be determined before marriage. If she is fine to live with her mother-in-law from the onset, that should be made very clear. Because recently someone was telling me they went to propose, and then the woman said she was unhappy to even live next door to the mother-in-law in a separate house. So they broke off the nikah. The nikah did not go ahead. That's the type of women we have now, that they cannot tolerate the mother-in-law. So the mother-in-law is like the devil for many of these young women. And the mother-in-laws, they can't help themselves. They have to say things to the daughter-in-law. There has to be something said, whether she didn't iron the clothes properly, or she didn't cook properly, or something was wrong, she didn't do something correctly, clean the house properly, they have to realize that the daughter-in-laws at the same time are not house slaves. They are not servants brought into the house. But at the same time, the daughter-in-law should attempt to make the relationship work. It's a very difficult thing to do. And this is why many marriages in the South Asian community break down.
What rights?
Rights.
What
What
rights
rights
does
does
the
the
wife
wife
have
have
over
over
the
the
husband
husband
and
and
vice
vice
versa?
versa?
So let's talk about the woman's rights first. The woman has the right that the husband firstly dress appropriately and smartly for the woman. In some hadith, they mention even the breath. Meaning, imagine they say about the Jews in the old times, their women would sleep around. Why would the women sleep around? Because the men were so unkempt. They would smell. This is in Arabia in ancient times. So the man cannot expect that his wife will be attracted to him and he's dressing not in a smart manner. He smells. He's not looking after himself. He's not grooming himself. The man should be smart for the woman. Secondly, he should provide for her. But what does providing mean? Providing means the standard of living she had before marriage, he provides the minimum of that standard. So it doesn't mean he has to buy her these designer labels, Gucci and all these other designer labels. If she didn't have that prior, this is why they say the man should marry a woman who is from a lower social background than himself. So if the man marries a woman richer than him, he will always be denigrated. He will always be degraded in front of her. So he should provide that much living standard as she had before or better. And then he must have intercourse with her, because he cannot abandon her. Some men, they marry a woman, they leave her alone for months on end. Some of them marry abroad and leave the woman there. The minimum, he should have intercourse with her. This is determined by the judgment in the time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, was within every 4 days. He should spend the night with her, minimum, once every 4 days, minimum. So that's a right of the woman as well. Additionally, the woman has the right that the man does not insult her. This is something people undermine. The man does not have the right to insult his wife. He does not have the right to swear at her, to be harsh to her. In fact, they say the man, when he enters the house, it should be such that he smiles, he's soft with the wife and the children. They say the men who act outside as if they are soft, at home they are the opposite. So you have these kind of clowns, people who act like they are soft and, Sufi outside, but in the house they could be wife beaters. These cases come that the man is beating his wife, is beating his children. All of that is, she has the right that the man is merciful towards her. But like I said, marriage is give and take. The woman at the same time should obey her husband in what I said, in those things which do not harm her. If the husband tells her to do something haram, she disobeys. But if he tells her to do something which is mubah, she should obey. At the same time, she should control her tongue towards the man, like the man should control his tongue towards the wife. And neither side has a right to raise their voice or to insult and swear at one another. No one has the right to do that. So this should be avoided. If you want to safeguard any marriage, as I mentioned earlier, they should be covering the faults of one another. Why do they need to complain to others when they should resolve their faults amongst themselves? Anytime a man and woman attempt to have a third party involvement, that marriage will lead to divorce. They should resolve those issues amongst themselves. So the tongue is one of the major reasons why marriages break down. Raising the voice and insulting and swearing. This happens with women because they become hormonal. They have, so when their periods, the time of their periods draws close, they become hormonal. And during their periods, they may be hormonal. And they may say certain things. How should the man react? One of the rights of the woman is that the man should have a higher level of tolerance at that stage. At that stage, the man should be the one who has the high level of tolerance. This is why the hadith states naqisatul aql, that the women, naqisatul aql means what? That they are hormonal. So the man should have a higher level of tolerance towards the woman during that time. Additionally, when we say the woman does the housework, there may be periods during her pregnancy, during breastfeeding, during her periods, where she may have moments where she needs rest. The man at that time should be hands-on in the house, meaning there are some lazy men that do not know how to do housework. They have been trained in such a way that what happens is their mother leaves. When they eat, their mother would pick up their dishes for them, and were not trained to pick up their own dishes. They cannot wash their own clothes. You have grown men who have their mother cleaning their underpants for them. Grown men. That should never happen. Especially in the South Asian community, Pakistani men, what they do, they expect the woman to clean the house. So if there are single men living in a house, the house is dirty. You go and see some of the houses where South Asian men live in, where they have no woman, you'll see that the house is messy. Why? Because they have been brought up thinking a woman should only clean up, when tahara is a part of your iman. So what they do, for instance, if you have stains on your boxers, this is for the young people, if you have stains on your boxers, you should be washing those stains yourself. You shouldn't, some of them, they said to me, oh, the washing machine washes them, not my mother. But the mother is the one picking up your boxes for you. They even defended themselves, saying, oh, the washing machine washes them, not the mother. So they are raised like this. So what happens, they have no responsibility in the house. They cannot do DIY, or they cannot even call in someone to do the DIY work. They cannot clean up after themselves. And this can become burdensome on some of the women, because they have children to raise. And this is what Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh was referring to when a man went to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh to complain about his wife. He came close to the house of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, and he heard the wife of Sayyidina Umar raising her voice. And then the man left. He thought, if he has this problem at home, what will he resolve for me? So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh chased after the man and said, you came to the door, did you have a need? The man said, yes. I came to complain about my wife, but then I heard your wife raising her voice. He said, these women, they bake our bread. They raise our children. They clean our homes. The minimum we can do is tolerate them. So in that sense, that is if the woman is doing all that. Now you also have lazy women. So lazy women in the sense they do not do that. They do not cook. They watch TV all day. And they will not clean up the house. And then they shout at the husband. So that's the imbalance that we're discussing. When you have these imbalances in any marriage, the marriage will always fail.
If a husband tells his wife to cover up, but she does not listen and still goes out, is he sinful?
So the woman is sinful in that case. He is instructing her not to leave the house uncovered. The fact she does that, she is sinful with Allah.
How often should a husband tell his wife to pray if she doesn't, because she doesn't pray, which in turn makes him angry?
So, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاسْتَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا. Command your family to pray and seek patience upon it. So he should continue commanding her to pray. And when she refuses, he has a right to be angry, but what does anger entail? Meaning, he can admonish her, he can reprimand her and remind her of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these type of things should be, again, this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam exhorted people to marry a spouse that is pious, a spouse that is already acting upon the deen of Allah.
There's 5 minutes to Maghrib, so we'll have a break now and we'll continue after Maghrib.
Question brother asked is, he says, my brother,
He says, my brother is 44 years old and he's still unmarried. But based on what you said about a single man should marry a single woman, the only potentials he has now are either divorcees or divorcees with children. And for such scenarios, what do you advise? And the same for women. There's a lot of women who focus on their career and they get to a certain age and then they don't find the kind of spouses that they want. What advice would you give?
So ultimately, with marriage, it comes down to what is a person seeking. Are they seeking to settle down with a wife and children? The answer is, if they are, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid them in finding a successful marriage and spouse. So in this case, someone who is 44 years old, if he has done no haram, he has no experience with a woman in terms of intimacy. There are many young women who have aged with time and have not been married also. So there are many suitable spouses for such a person. But if he believes he can maintain a wife who has been previously married and children from another marriage, if he can maintain that, if he believes that, then he meaning in terms of Sharia, he is permitted to marry. But is it recommended? I would say I would recommend for him to marry someone who has never been married previously. And you do find women of a similar age.
And in regards to that one question, I just need to elaborate. You know, the one where you said in your video where a husband can stop his wife's parents from coming to the house,
Into the house.
into the house. Can a mother-in-law and father-in-law stop the daughter-in-law from visiting her own parents? The mother-in-law and father-in-law.
No. So the father-in-law has no authority over the daughter-in-law. The mother-in-law has no authority over the daughter-in-law. This is the issue that causes contentious marriages. So what's the solution to this? I will elaborate on this even more. The elaboration to that is that yes, the husband has that right, but the in-laws do not have that right. So the husband must resolve the issue. Now the problem young men are having is they do not want to fall out with toxic parents who insist on meddling with the marriage. At the same time, the son does not want to fall out with them, and he does not want his marriage to fall into tatters and divorce. So what did I say at the beginning? I said you do not obey parents in those things which will harm you. So you provide the accommodation for your wife, separate to the in-laws if the in-laws are toxic, and even if the wife just demands that, that's her right. But at the same time, I said I advise the women as well that marriage is give and take. Sometimes it's beneficial for the wife to live with her in-laws financially as well as emotionally. There are benefits as well. For instance, childbearing, when she gives birth, sometimes the in-laws will help out with the child, with housework, financially. So many benefits of living with a large extended family. So people need to look at both situations. One is having large extended families has its benefits. The women need to look at this. Advice for young women who get married or women who are in a marriage: remember, today your mother-in-law is in charge of the house, but tomorrow if you stay in that house, you will be the one in charge. As a woman grows older, she gets more authority. So tomorrow, if you stay within the extended family, you will have the authority of the house, meaning the woman in Islamic law, as she grows older, she has more authority and power. But let's say she exercises her rights and she says, I want to move out. Now the husband, if he goes with the wife, this is the problem. The men are not balanced either. So they give the woman that right, but then they'll give an arm and a leg in terms of allowing her to work. Then she works. Then they have two incomes at the same time, and the man is paying for everything. Meaning there's no balance. If you want to go according to Islamic law completely, then you must follow the Islamic law completely, not only when it suits you. So what happens with these women? They insist on the Islamic law that they move out, which is fine. But they forget the Islamic law in everything else. And the same with the men. The men, when it suits them, they follow Islamic law. So they will say the woman must cook or the woman must clean the house, which is a right, by the way, of the man in the Hanafi school. She cooks and cleans for the husband. But at the same time, they will have no kindness to the woman. They will demand things from the woman which are not found in, they are not demands in the Sharia law. So if you are going in accordance with the law of Islam, the man must look after his parents, his own parents. The woman, if she decides to be literal in terms of moving out and refuses to meet the in-laws, that's her choice. But then if she will be so literal, then the man can be literal as well. Meaning there's a level of ihsan where there is kindness of the wife must show a type of tolerance and kindness to the parents of the husband. But does she have to live with them? The answer is if she exercises her right not to live with them, that is fine. If you believe by living in the house, the marriage will break up and the children will no longer have their mother around or their father will not be around or the woman will leave with the children, then you move that woman out. But at the same time, you balance your relationship with your parents, and then the parents need advice. Meaning these parents who are toxic to the point that they wreck the marriages of their own children based on their whims and desires are not following the teachings of Islam. Meaning it's a cultural practice which they have superimposed on their children. So everyone picks and chooses Islamic law how they deem fit is better for them. But in reality, if you apply the Sharia law as it is, then these disputes will very rarely arise.
If a wife not divorced but separated from the husband, so if a wife who's not divorced but
but
separated
separated
from
from
the
the
husband,
husband, does the husband then, or still, is the husband still obliged to provide for her and her children? And what are the children's financial rights over their father?
So if this woman leaves her husband willingly, disobeys her husband, the husband is not obliged to upkeep the woman. He is not obliged to pay for her living costs. She must be with her husband and obey her husband, then he is obliged to pay. So if there is a woman, in some cases they kick the man out the house, they call the police, they place restraining orders or they make a charge against the man, false accusations many times. If they do that, the man is not obliged to pay to upkeep the maintenance of that woman. Yes, he must provide for the children, but in some cases, some of these women, they utilize that money for their own personal expenditure. So in this case scenario, firstly, a woman who makes false accusations on a man or a man who makes false accusations on a woman, they have no fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their marriage will doom, it will go to failure. Their marriage will fail. Inevitably, the marriage will fail. Secondly, the man is not obliged to provide for her if she is disobeying and not living with him. Thirdly, the maintenance of the children, he is obliged to pay, but it must be proven that the costs, the money is being utilized on the children. There are people who receive maintenance for their children, they save the money and they go and build a mansion in Pakistan. I know of cases like this. So the money, the benefits they receive from the government for the child may be ill and they receive a certain amount of money for an ill child. They save that money and they build a mansion for their family in Pakistan when that money should be spent on the child. That's the child's haqq. So there's rights of children as well. The money of children should not be spent on the parents. There's some income that comes in for the children that must be spent on the children. So many times they do not spend on the children, they'll spend on their own family back in Pakistan or elsewhere.
how often should a person renew their nikah out of precaution that a statement or action may have been done unknowingly? Some scholars say it should be done every evening.
Ibn Abidin rahimullah mentions this in Raddul Muhtar. Precaution would be perhaps once a month. If someone believes that they may have said something which is unbelief, kufr, then it's recommended that they renew the nikah every so often.
Could you just tell us how?
So the man just says to the woman, I have married you. She says yes in front of two witnesses. If the children are big, children, if they are past the age of puberty, they can make them witnesses, and he just gives her a dowry of 10 dirhams is minimum dowry, by the way. 10 dirhams is about £25. A person should not pay more than 500 dirham dowry. So 500 dirham would be about £1,250. That's the recommended maximum dowry. Nowadays, people are paying 50,000, 60,000. The dowry, maximum 500 dirhams, is the recommended maximum dowry.
What's the purpose of the dowry?
The purpose of the dowry is to honor the woman. And the honor is, it's a token of, but in reality, dowry is the word for what the man receives, by the way. The bride price is the correct word in English, bride price. So I said bride price in English sounds very strange indeed, as if you are paying a price for the bride. Bride price in English. So mahr, the minimum is 10 dirhams. So they just give £25 and renew the nikah.
So that's false then, that they say that the dowry or mahr is used that if the woman gets divorced, then that money is to help sustain her for 3 months. Is that false?
No, some scholars may have mentioned that as being an illah reasoning, what they call ratio legis, the illah behind the ruling. But as far as I know, that's not mansoos, it's not stipulated.
I am wanting my spouse to be more practicing, but then why do I feel bad asking him about this quality of being practicing? I think a woman asked this.
Well, you should not feel bad. The best spouse is the spouse who wakes up for Salatul Fajr and wakes up their partner for Salatul Fajr. So you pray Salatul Fajr yourself and you wake up your partner for Salatul Fajr. That should be common practice in every household.
Is interacting with the opposite gender whilst refraining from suggestive behavior for the purpose of getting to know them before proposing still prohibited?
So what's in the sunnah is a person, when they propose to a woman, they are permitted to look at the face and the hands of the woman. And they are permitted to converse, but not in private. It must be in public and in front of the wali, the guardian of the woman. So, as I said, there should not be any of this flirtatious behavior. So what some people do, they go online, they start flirting with the woman, and then they fall into haram. So they will ask for inappropriate pictures or videos. All of this is haram, and under the pretense I'm looking for a spouse. All of this is haram in the Sharia. So it should be done in an open place, perhaps in the house of the guardian, or in an open place like a coffee shop where they meet up to discuss the proposal. These type of things should be done, or even better, in the masjid.
Wife and
Mother-in-law do not get on. How is it for the wife to try and withhold the kids from seeing the mother and father-in-law?
So in this scenario, again, mother-in-law, the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, this is the ongoing war that we see, the war of attrition between these two family members. But does she have the right to stop the grandparents from seeing the children? The answer is that when the husband here should intervene and have the children visit their grandparents. So the husband has the right to do that. She has no right to stop that. Unless, of course, the grandparents have ulterior motives or turn the children away from Islam.
I worked full-time for 29 years. I managed to buy a large house and cleared my mortgage. My wife then lied to the police regarding domestic abuse, and my eldest 20-year-old son supported her. They had me evicted from the house and made me homeless. In addition to this, the police arrested me and the magistrates court fined me and gave me 200 hours community service. I lost my DBS. Why are women generally from Pakistan so evil to UK men?
So at the same time, what happens is, as you have women from different places can be evil to men, you can have men being evil to women. So you actually have domestic abuse cases. So what I would recommend here is no one should firstly place their house, the name of their house, on the spouse's name. They should have the house on their own name. So if you purchase the house should remain on your name. Similarly, women who purchase a house, and the same can happen to women, meaning a woman purchases the house and then the man takes the house of the woman. The opposite scenario. So this is why I would recommend, previously I would tell people to register their marriages. Now I tell them not to register the marriages. Why? Because some people, they have realized that they can make false claims regarding someone and take possession of their home and take possession of their property. So as long as you're able to demonstrate that the house actually belongs to you, you cannot be evicted from your own home. That's the legality. If when the police arrive, if you can show them that you are the occupier and the owner of the house, they cannot evict you from that house. So in this particular scenario, he should not have placed the house name on his spouse. Similarly, parents should not give everything to their children. They should wait till they pass away, make a will, and they inherit. No parents should give their children any property to keep while they are alive.
Men are often advised to marry women on the deen, but what does this actually mean in practice? Some men assume they need to look for a niqab wearing woman or one who studies Dars and Nizami, even though some of these women struggle with managing a home or cooking, whereas those with less Islamic education may be more adequate in these practical aspects of marriage.
So deen here does not mean studying, as you say, Dars and Nizami. Most of these Dars and Nizami courses for women are watered down courses anyhow, meaning the women do not learn much fiqh or practical deen in the first place. It's just something done by these institutions so they can collect money to fund their own institutions. Deen here would mean, how is she with her parents? Is she bar bil walidain? How are her parents in terms of the deen? Does she actually, and it would include cooking and cleaning, because that shows responsibility. Now, so many of these people, feminists, who moaned about my previous speeches, they said, yes, we get takeaways or frozen foods. Do you actually feed your children that rubbish? My question to them is, never mind your husband, do you actually feed your children this on a daily basis? Who in their right mind will feed their child takeaways in the afternoon, takeaways in the evening, frozen food in the afternoon, frozen food in the evening? The woman needs to cook for her children, the healthy meals to feed the children, healthy meals that are made with wholesome, good ingredients and with love and care, have an effect on the child when the child is being raised. So when we say a woman needs to cook, it's not because she's cooking only for her husband, she's also cooking for her children. Similarly, if women just followed 3 guidelines, their marriage will always remain intact. And they say that a woman who keeps her own household intact is an intelligent woman. How can she keep her own household intact? By feeding the man, by allowing him to sleep as much as he wants, and never raising a voice to him. If she carried those 3 principles, she would keep her marriage intact. How does the man keep his marriage intact? By helping in household chores and domestic work, by helping out in domestic chores and household work, by being responsible, by providing, and by showing love and affection. If the man did these 3 things, his marriage would also be successful. So it's something that works both ways. And then, as far as other relatives are concerned, you cover each other, you cover each other's faults, you do not disgrace one another in front of others, and you do not expect the parents of each spouse to resolve their marriage problems. You are no longer children that your parents will intervene. You are adults who are raising your own family. So therefore, you need to behave like adults.
Does the woman have the right to demand a house from the husband simply because she doesn't want to stay in the same house as his parents? What if the husband does not want to purchase a property via a mortgage?
So the woman does not have a right to demand that he purchase a property. She can demand separate living quarters. There's a distinction. Separate living quarters can entail rent, can entail even a council house. It doesn't mean that the man needs to take out a mortgage. So some of these women pressure the men to purchase a house, and the man is unable to do so. Or it gives so much pressure, it places pressure, undue stress on the man. So what's essential is to provide accommodation which is suitable. Some of these women, perhaps when they demand accommodation, she grows up in Small Eat, but she wants accommodation in Solihull. She grows up in Small Eat, she wants perhaps an apartment in Jewellery Quarter. So you have to be realistic. What type of suitable accommodation are you demanding? So as I said, when she exercises her right to move away from the man's family, she moves away from a barakah in her life also. What is that barakah? There is barakah in extended family. There is blessings in earnings when you have extended families. There is blessings in earnings when you stay with your parents. There's definitely blessings in your life. If she still demands that she wants to move away, and the man does provide that accommodation, the man should not stop visiting his parents. The man should not cut ties with his own family. So these things come and go with many factors. Some of these women, they will demand that the man move out, but then they will demand he doesn't visit his parents as he did. And they will make additional demands. But if she is making that demand to move out, then the man should exercise all the Islamic law, not just aspects of Islamic law that are suitable for her. He doesn't need to provide extra jewelry and every so often buy her a diamond ring. Diamond is rigged anyhow, meaning the price of diamond is rigged. Diamonds are actually worth £5. They just, one corporation controls the entire diamond market that makes the diamonds worth £500 and £5,000. So he's spending on her buying a diamond rings, and then he doesn't visit his own elderly parents perhaps. There are some cases where the woman may be vulnerable to the in-laws, and there are some cases where the elderly parents are vulnerable to the evil daughter-in-law. It happens both ways. Sometimes you can have an evil mother-in-law, sometimes you can have an evil daughter-in-law, sometimes you can have an evil husband, sometimes you can have all three. So elderly parents sometimes placed in old people's homes. This happens. So sometimes the daughter-in-law will say, oh, let's move out. They move out. Then they find out that the parents are elderly. They need someone to look after them. She will say, yes, let's look after them and make them write the property in our name. This happens. So then the parents sign off the property to the son or to the daughter-in-law, the son and the daughter-in-law. So suddenly the daughter-in-law is good with the parents because she has the property in her mind. So there are so many factors. Remember, these scenarios are like mathematical scenarios. You can have so many different scenarios, different case scenarios. There's not one solution that fits all these scenarios. There's different types of cases that come about.
My wife filed for divorce through the UK courts. In the UK, people have gone through the divorce process are aware that the husband has no choice but to agree. The courts do state that the divorce is not a religious divorce and give the example of the Catholics. Would the court divorce be an actual divorce for the Muslims?
So if the husband agrees to the divorce, it actually does occur. It will count as a divorce.
There are many organizations, including organizations.
This is why I said, do not register the marriage, because there are some things that can be abused. One of them is property, and income. So for instance, a woman can, and the man, in some cases, the man can claim the property of the woman, or the woman can claim the property of the man.
There are many organizations, including organizations that are run by well-known people who are claimants of being from the Ahl Sunnah in the UK. A few are in Birmingham. They charge close to £1,000, which they state is non-refundable. They send 3 letters, text messages to the husband, and give the woman a hula so that she can get married again. Are these hulas valid? I think you
So
answered that
I've
already.
answered that
Yeah,
already.
that's
These
fine.
type of khulas are not valid.
A lot of women state because they live in the land of the kafir, kuffar, they are allowed in Islam to follow the law of the kuffar and take advantage of it, i.e. take the husband's house, children, money, using the court system. Is this permissible?
The answer is it's not permissible, but if they want to live like kuffar, then when the man does the same, they go and resort to Islamic law. So we cannot pick and choose what suits us. This is why it's absolutely essential for someone to marry a person who has actual deen. It's very hard to determine. So how do you do that? You observe, but then you do istikhara. Now, Salatul Istikhara, when you pray Salatul Istikhara, so many people think Salatul Istikhara is only based on dreams. It's not actually based on dreams. You pray the Salatul Istikhara, you make dua, the dua al-Istikhara. 2 rak'atain. In the first rak'ah, Surah Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun. In the second rak'ah, Qul Huwa Allahu Ahad. When you do salam, you do the dua al-Istikhara. The next day you do the same. You do this for 7 days. Then you go ahead with what you want to do. You go ahead. Inshallah, nothing bad will come out of it. That is how you actually do istikhara. But some people, they do istikhara, they expect a dream and they may follow the dream. The dream issue is to do with something else, meaning it's not necessary that you actually see a dream.
The government gives a lot of financial initiatives to women to help break up families. Universal credit is paid for the children if a couple are living together, but if a woman leaves her husband, the universal credit would still be paid to the same level. But the
The husband will be forced to pay a large amount from his pay as child maintenance. A lot of non-Muslim European countries believe the child maintenance system in the UK is very unfair. Women think differently to men. How can Muslim women avoid being manipulated by the system the UK government has to encourage the breakup of families?
So as I said, the aqila, the woman with the mind, with the brain, is the woman who builds a house, not the woman who destroys a house. If the parents are people with that mind, now what do I mean by this with regard to the parents? There are so many parents that destroy their children's marriage. How? The mother will not advise her daughter correctly. They will encourage the daughter to leave the house of the husband. So when the woman leaves her husband's house, the mother will encourage that, the father will encourage that. If the parents do not have intellect, the kids will not have intellect also. So that is what tends to destroy the marriage. So the parents are responsible in many cases of how the daughter or the son behaves. Some sons may abuse their wife on the behest of their parents. So you have abuse of the woman based upon the request of the parents of the man. In both cases, they destroy the marriage.
My wife has chosen to leave the home with my 18-month-old child without any explanation and against my wishes. Her safety here is guaranteed, she has ample provision and is well accommodated. What is the legal ruling regarding this? And what do you advise I do as a husband?
So again, she's disobedient by leaving the house without a real reason. So the most you can do in this case scenario here is admonish and give them wa'ad. But the Quran commands us to get, in this case scenario, when this woman is known as Nashiza. Nashiza is a woman who does not fulfill the rights of the husband. In this case scenario, members of a household are brought forth and members of the household of the man in order to resolve the issue. And this is when these issues become unresolvable, they lead to talaq. So the talaq actually occurs because the issue cannot be fixed.
My wife visits her parents and spends
weeks and months at their house. I am very unhappy and find this too much. What is the legal ruling regarding this?
So the woman is not permitted to do that. It's haram for her to do that except with the husband's permission. She cannot just go to her parents' home without the permission of the husband. And she needs to take permission even staying in her parents' home. But in some cases, you may have cases where the man is cheating. So the man is cheating on the wife, and then the wife leaves. So some of these men are tricky as well. They don't tell you both scenarios. So some men, they come up to the imam, they'll mention, my wife is doing this. But they won't tell you that, yes, I was also doing this. And that is why my wife is doing this. So sometimes they just want the answer one way so they can utilize that. So when you deal with these issues, you need to get the whole story out. So in some cases, for instance, a man, he may have a girlfriend on the side, which is haram, or an undercover wife, or he does something which harms the woman, and the woman leaves. So it's not always as easy as my wife has just left me. Sometimes there are reasons why the wife has actually left. So we need to determine sometimes why the woman has left. But if she has left without cause, explain something to me. Why would a woman leave the house of the husband if she was comfortable, more comfort than her parents' home? There would be something. Meaning if the man was providing her happiness, comfort, she would never leave his house. But there is something as to why that woman is leaving. So unless she's totally evil, as some men attempt to paint the women, so there is always two sides to the story.
If a potential woman I am looking to marry works as a doctor, what recommendation do you have in balancing work and household responsibilities like cooking, cleaning between the couple? Could it ever work, or is it best to avoid these prospects altogether? Maybe he's not a doctor, that's why.
So I would advise that he marry someone of a similar kind of background, unless he's able to make it work.
Or opinion on marrying after haram relations, like marrying a girlfriend.
So someone who's doing haram with a woman, he must marry her. Meaning, if she's not married, he must marry her and stop doing haram. I'll give you an example of this. A family came to see me. Of course, no one knows who I'm referring to. The young man had impregnated the woman. He had impregnated a non-Muslim woman. The parents wanted this man to abandon the non-Muslim woman, Christian woman. So that would mean that they abandoned their own grandchild. When they came to me, I carried out a nikah between the young man and the woman. Now that child has grown up as a Muslim. So she remained Christian, the woman, but the child has grown up as a Muslim. So these are the irresponsible type of parents we have in our community. They know their son is doing zina. They not only make them abandon the child, they do not do nikah of the young man. So if there is zina going on between two people, nikah should be carried out straight away.
My parents are getting old and live in another country with no one to take care of them. Does my husband have the right to not let me visit them to take care of them? They live in another country.
If they have no one else to look after them, he must permit her to go and look after the parents. He must allow her to do that. If they have no one else to look after them.
Please talk about
The effects of pornography and why it should be avoided at all costs before and after marriage. This is one of the biggest struggles for the youth today, which is not talked about enough. Statistics show 99% of young boys are now exposed to it.
So people have to be realistic. If they are not marrying young men off at a young age, in legal age, the young men are not getting married, they will be doing haram. So the bad effects of looking at haram would be, number one, they have high expectations of how a woman should be. Now, what that leads to is that they have specific ideas of what beauty is. A man who doesn't look at haram will be satisfied with an average looking woman, because that is the tabi'ah, the nature of being a man. But someone who looks at so much haram, he will become picky and choosy regarding the type of woman he marries. Secondly, they will not be able to perform. So these men are unable to satisfy their wives. And remember earlier I mentioned second marriages. These second marriage heroes, they are the men who can't satisfy the first wife. So when they are unable to satisfy the first wife may not be as interactive with them in the bedroom as much as they want. So what do? They resort to a second wife, thinking that the second wife will fulfill them. What ends up happening? They do not fulfill the needs of the first wife. They do not fulfill the needs of the second wife because of the harmful effects of what they have been watching.
This bachara. I want to marry, but I'm still studying. I can't stop thinking about marriage. I have no income as a student to marry should I marry someone? What would you recommend? Should I or not?
I would tell him to get married. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated in a hadith that women bring amwal, they bring the wealth. When a person gets married, he will get wealthy. Secondly, the talibul ilm, if he's studying Sharia, the talibul ilm, when he marries with the correct intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will sustain him and supply his sustenance for him. He will avoid haram also. So students of knowledge should get and must get married young. They should not delay their marriage.
I intended to marry a pious woman just for the sake of Allah and His Rasul, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not because of her beauty, wealth, lineage, or status. Now the concern is, I know few of such pious women via social media or in person, but I can't approach them out of haya, mashallah. I can't even talk to their parents as I don't know them, nor do I have contact with them. So what would be the halal approach in modern times to find a pious spouse?
So this young man seems like these incels, these people who just observe people's Facebook accounts and go on social media and observe how women are. He should be inquiring in real life in his locality, in his local area, ask his mother to find him a suitable spouse, ask people around him rather than observing Facebook accounts. How can you tell someone's pious on a Facebook account or on a social media account? So this incel issue of young men sitting in the internet, alone in their room on the internet, and then coming out with these scenarios is something that should be avoided.
Is the daughter-in-law obliged to inform the mother-in-law whenever she leaves the house to go somewhere with her husband and include all the details about where they are going, what they are doing?
I think the questioner knows the answer to that, but they are looking for me to say that so they can utilize that as a clip, taking this entire lecture out of context. Meaning, if you listen to the entire lecture, you'll get the wholesome picture. I've said very clearly that the daughter-in-law is not under the subjugation of the mother-in-law. The son must have birrul walidain, but is not obliged to obey parents when it harms him. So again, it comes to give and take.
Is the husband allowed to refuse intimacy with the wife?
No. So the husband who refuses intimacy with his wife, he violates her rights and is sinful with Allah. He is sinful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He must be intimate with the minimum every 4 days. Minimum.
Is the daughter-in-law obliged to do all the chores for her in-laws?
Again, we know the answer. The daughter-in-law is not obliged to do the work for her in-laws. We know this. But because of the South Asian culture intertwined with these marriages, the marriages do not work out. So they lead to divorce. They lead to disputation. So people have to be realistic. They cannot change the South Asian culture. Look how long I've been attempting to counter the fact that South Asians throw so much rubbish on the roads will never change. I can campaign for 100 years. India will still be the biggest toilet on earth. So similarly, in this case, the in-law culture will never change. So they have to be realistic. What is the realism? Realism is that while the situation stands in this way, you have to give and take. If you cannot give and take, then move out, that's fine. But if you can give and take, then make the marriage work. With this daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, so much of the Bollywood culture, Bollywood movies and programs are based upon this storyline. So young women are programmed from a young age to have this rift with the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law with the daughter-in-law. And the strange thing is, the daughter-in-law will despise her mother-in-law. All her life, she will mention the bad traits of her mother-in-law. When she becomes a mother-in-law, she behaves the way her mother-in-law behaved towards her daughter-in-law. So it's a cycle that continues.
My wife swears at me in front of my children and is very abusive towards me. What is the best way to handle this?
The best way of handling this is firstly, manly characteristics. Manly characteristics do not mean you beat a woman. Any man who beats a woman, these men who beat women, they cannot fight outside. Generally, they cannot fight outside. And you will find them to be very cowardly outside. So beating a woman is not manly. Secondly, raising your voice to a woman is not manly also. It's how a man behaves in terms of as I said, if he's placing smiles on his wife's face, on his children's face, when he enters the home, the children are happy to see him. If the man was like that, he would not face abuse. Now, if the woman is still demented, then the Quran gives us guidelines of avoiding sleeping with her for 3 days. You cannot exceed 3 days. That should affect her, that the husband is refusing to share the bed with me for 3 days. That is the guidelines given by Al-Quran Al-Kareem. The strike is mentioned in the Quran. I'm mentioning this, but the strike is mentioned as a last resort, as غير مبرح, non-harmful strike. You cannot do the strike in this day and age. Why? Because the men are not the Sahaba alayhim ridwan. The men today, they do not know what that entails. They end up becoming abusers. So the strike should not be done. Meaning there is a strike mentioned in the Quran. The man is permitted to carry out one strike on the woman as a last resort. But in this day and age, that should not be done. So if the woman is shouting and abusing, there are reasons. She either has emotional issues. She's going through hormonal issues. The man needs to recognize that. She's probably stressed out with the children. She's probably stressed out with the in-laws. She is probably worried about a specific scenario. All of these factors need to be taken into account.
Is a prenup, nuptial agreement, permissible in the Hanafi school?
So, how does this agreement work? How does this agreement work?
Does anyone know how a prenup works? I think normally, for example, when a man and a woman get married, one example is when a man and woman get married, the man can make an agreement that if you ask for a divorce, all that property and stuff that's in my name, you can't have it. That's a prenup. That you agree, if we divorce, all that I have is mine. So if she goes to the court, English court, and she asks for a divorce,
that would be permitted.
If the husband permits his wife to wear, what is the best way to bring up children in regards to UK school education and Islamic studies in the UK?
So raising children is a different issue. Remember, the parents have the obligation to teach their children Quran and reading and writing, these type of skills. So if people are sending their children to schools, Remember, your children are spending most of their day in school, where schools which are designed for consumer societies, these schools are designed to make people work in corporations and the institutions of the corporate state. So the type of education that will be given to them is from a specific value. It's not from a holistic Islamic value. So homeschooling and private tuition is something people must consider.
4 questions left. Should a man be helping out in terms of feeding the baby, changing the nappies, etc., because she also works and then the responsibility should be shared?
Look, without the woman working, the man should take those responsibilities. So, firstly, the woman should not be working. She should be a full-time mother in a scenario that we would say in a utopian society. But if she is working, the father should take those responsibilities in the first place. What do I mean by this? After the woman gives birth, when she gives birth, she may be tired. So the child cries at night, the father must take the responsibility of bottle feeding the child, of changing the nappy, of potty training the children. All of these things are a shared responsibility. You cannot place it on one parent. But these are the benefits of extended families also. Because what happens in extended families, mother-in-laws do take that responsibility also. The extended family also takes that responsibility. So in societies like in London and Greater London, there are Muslim families where both couples work and they need 2 incomes. But in some places, you do not require 2 incomes. You need 1 income. So the woman should have the ease of staying home. Even if she stays home, the man still must maintain some responsibility of the upkeep of the children and the raising of the children.
A married couple, both British born, educated, living with the man's parents,
It's very, or mother-in-law again, doesn't matter. How can a Muslim woman who actively tries to practice the deen, can she navigate the challenges of materialistic society where men are increasingly becoming succumbed to temptations the system is providing them, making them particularly oblivious to their duties at times, while facing an indifferent state that doesn't take the responsibility of women who have a very weak support system otherwise?
I believe the women in the UK do not have a weak support system, but the men should take the following responsibility. As I mentioned, doing house chores and DIY, every young man should at least know how to have the boiler fixed, how to, if the electricity goes out, how to have the electricity fixed, how to have housework done, meaning when they need housework done, repairs, there are many young men who are unable to do this. So similarly, they should be able to provide. And thirdly, they must show mercy, immense mercy towards their spouse and the children. These are requirements that are essential upon young men to learn. So when women look for a spouse, they must look for these 3 qualities within the man.
Any questions? Yeah, or Sheikh will wrap up with the dua.